Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. Here again with criminal defense attorney Tim Forshey of Forshey Law at C2 Tactical, talking about legal stuff here on John's Briefs. And we had a Brazil video on the channel not long ago. Dude followed on his moto for like 4 miles by 2 other guys on a moto, telling him to give it up, give it up, give it up. Well, he gets off the moto at one point and ends up shooting and killing the driver of the motorcycle. The passenger he takes into custody. They were completely unarmed at the end of things, but was it reasonable for him to think that they were? Let's talk about it.
To win the fight after the fight, you need help. After a use of force, I trust Firearms Legal Protection to help me win the fight for the rest of my life. From their 24/7 attorney-answered hotline to coverage for the use of all legal tools, Firearms Legal Protection has you covered. Get a discount by signing up at the link below.
Now, the funny part here, Tim, is that we're sitting and talking about a video out of Brazil and then applying American law to it.
Correct, which is folly, you know. But the point is, pretend it's not Brazil. We're trying to learn from this. So if this happened in your home state, if this happened in your hometown, what would be appropriate? So let's learn from the facts. Maybe we can't learn from the law from Brazil, but yeah.
Well, I mean, carjackings are at ridiculous levels across these fine United States.
DC just broke their all-time record, I think. You know, just horrific. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is not some over there problem.
No,
now,
not at all.
it might be an over there problem on a motorcycle, right? There's not enough motorcyclists here in the U.S. that's a big problem in the U.S. But carjackings, huge here. So we're going to talk about this. About 70% of our viewers are United States based. Or on this channel here at Active Self Protection Extra. About 90%, and in the ASPA Unlimited app, about the same. So we have an American audience. We're going to talk about this from an American perspective. Now, we get this idea that, okay, these guys are chasing him, and if I just put this in a vacuum, and I say, dude shot 2 unarmed men, that doesn't sound great.
No, it certainly doesn't sound great.
However, context always is king.
Yeah. Sure, it better be.
And that's where this is. This is why we always say that from a legal perspective, it's so fact dependent.
Right.
And so dependent on the details of what actually happened. Because otherwise, it's just guy shot 2 unarmed men.
Yep.
Well, but wait a minute, what were those 2 unarmed men doing?
Right.
And how was that working? So how do you analyze a case like this?
The first thing I always want to tell people, because I get hypothetical questions, especially when I teach CCW classes.
So what happens if, can I shoot someone if? Oh.
Well, a lot of times people say, well, and the guy's unarmed. And I'm like, how do you know the guy's unarmed? Did he go through a metal detector? Did you pat him down thoroughly? Do you know how to do a thorough pat down? Because you don't know that they're unarmed. You may not see a weapon. That does not mean they're unarmed. No, I mean they don't have a weapon yet. It might mean they haven't reached around to the back of their belt yet. So first of all, keep it in context in that perspective, right? In other words, when he shot those 2 guys on that motorcycle, I would bet that he did not know they were unarmed.
Oh, I'm sure.
In fact, I would bet that he probably feared, reasonably in my opinion, that they were armed.
I think there's an important distinction here. We're going to talk about that in a minute.
Hindsight is always 20/20. We searched the bodies, we couldn't find a gun. Yeah, but we need to look at what happened before that. Why did he shoot 2 unarmed people? Because he didn't know they were unarmed based upon their actions and conduct. And I think that's if justice is served in these kind of cases, that's the way you have to look at it. Is what prompted this? What caused it? Was somebody reasonable? Maybe they made an error. Maybe in hindsight it was a big error. But was it a reasonable error at the time they made it? Just because you die on the operating table doesn't mean the doctor's at fault. The doctor may have made a mistake, but it might have been a reasonable mistake. It's still not the doctor's fault. That's how life works. Yeah. A lot of people don't grasp that.
Well, and did he believe they were armed?
And I mean, they're trying to rob my motorcycle. Were they going to do it on their good looks and their manners? I mean, I'm assuming they're going to use force to take something from me that's not theirs.
And in this case, again, in Brazil, 2 dudes on a moto is a prelude to an armed robbery.
Exactly.
And it is
or a hit. The guy on the back's got a machine pistol, right?
We see this so often. Right. It's the guy in the back has a gun. He jumps off the bike, starts pointing guns around. They steal your stuff and take off.
Right.
And literally, it's not even in the news anymore because it's just endemic.
Right.
It's just everywhere in Brazil. All of South America, right? So South and Central America, 2 dudes on a moto, prelude to an armed robbery.
Right.
If you're in Asia or Africa, 2 dudes on a moto, you're going to see 5,000 of them, and it's not a problem. Yeah. Different cultures, right? Different go signals. In fact, I think the most number of people I've seen on a moto in Africa was 9.
I thought you were going to say 4.
No, no, a fairly small moto in Kigali, Rwanda.
Was there a sheet of plywood involved?
No, there was a love seat. So I'm not joking. A dude had taken the rear shocks off and like turned them into
Baling wire
2x4s.
and duct tape are amazing products.
And then had built a love seat onto the back of his moto,
My
and he had
God.
8 people on the love seat and him on the front, off and running. I'm not joking. In anybody been to Kigali, Rwanda,
That
you could
is
back up my
awesome.
story on that kind of stuff, man.
They've probably seen the same guy. He's probably a star.
No kidding. So, wow. Anyways, totally different world. So this guy, I mean, for 4 kilometers, they're following him, saying, give it up, oh, you know, give us your bike. And he's evaded them for multiple miles. Would, in his shoes, a Brazilian, right? Not John in Kigali, Rwanda, where we see people all the time, whatever, but even, you know, there where they're saying, give it up. Is it reasonable for me to say they're going to do that with a gun because they're going to threaten me with superior force?
First of all, if we're talking about the disparity of force, I need to know how many is a Brazilian. Is that like more than a trillion?
That many, yes.
One thing that I noticed when I watched the video too is that clearly this guy knew that they'd been hassling him and trying to take his bike for a long time. You know, again, 4 or 5 miles in the city, I mean, it must have been 10, 15 minutes probably. I'm
sure.
It looked to me at the very end, right as the people pulled up, maybe he thought he'd lost them. Did you notice that he sort of seemed a little startled right there?
Yeah, I think he thought he did.
Oh my God, they're still here? I think that maybe he thought he'd lost them.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
So, and I think when you factor that in, it also means that you have to take with another grain of salt on any of us Monday morning quarterbackings that are talking about what he did, because I think he thought he'd solved the problem, and then suddenly he had realized he hadn't, and he had to reassess and reacquire a plan. Right, so that gives to me that gives him a little more leeway as well.
I agree.
It wasn't like he made an ambush for him and got out and drew down a bead and then started shooting when they came around the corner. That's not what happened here. So
and so I want to be cautious because there's a difference between I didn't know they weren't armed and I reasonably believed they were.
That's correct.
So just because I didn't know that they weren't armed, so I killed them.
You could say that about anybody walking down the street.
Right.
These people had been expressing the desire to steal from him with assumedly, again, force.
Right.
For a long time. For 15 minutes, for 5 miles, it's a long time.
And I think there's a fair, you know, he wasn't a big guy, but the 2 dudes on the moto were little scrawny little suckers. So if he was confident that they weren't armed and they're like, give us your motorcycle. No, you scrawny little twerp, get out of my face.
Right. And I've got a helmet on.
Yeah, and guess what? You get off that bike and I'm going to teach you a lesson and send you home to your mama with some welts. Yeah. Well, but so then why does he pull a gun? The only reasonable answer here is because I was absolutely sure these guys were armed.
And I think that's a very reasonable inference.
I think it's a reasonable
from the facts,
inference.
from their conduct. Again, assuming that this whole story is true, which I have no reason to doubt. Then why wouldn't you think that? Of course, I mean, they're not going to come up and offer to buy your motorcycle from you or offer to give you a back rub for your motorcycle. They're going to threaten you with great bodily injury or death to take what's not theirs. That's a reasonable inference. That's called robbers going back for 4,000 or 5,000 years, I'm sure. So,
right.
Yeah.
And so, again, I don't know Brazilian law, right? In Brazil, from everything I've been told cops, if off-duty cops get in gunfights and they don't think they've been recorded, they'll bounce because they're worried about their judicial system and having to justify their actions. Yikes. I've heard that from Brazilian cops. Here in the U.S., of course, you don't want to do that. Like, that's bad juju. And I think even in the U.S., though, in most jurisdictions, they got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that what you did was unreasonable.
Yeah, in Arizona, they have to prove that you weren't in fear for your life. You no longer have to prove you're in fear for your life. Once you have a colorable claim of self-defense, the state has to disprove that.
Right.
That's huge. That's helpful. So
it's a great presumption.
And largely we can thank Harold Fish for that. So God bless Harold Fish's memory.
God bless the memory of Harold Fish. And I'm sorry for what happened to you, sir, and how you had to deal with that. But thank you for doing so well for us. And if you're interested in the case of Harold Fish, I actually have a multi-part series on Active Self-Protection Extra about Harold and his terrible ordeal. So anyways, I think it was reasonable, right? I think at the end of the day,
and it's like you always say. I mean, I love that term. You put your quarter in the jukebox, you're going to dance the song. These guys are going around stealing motorcycles. Guess what? You're going to get shot.
You're going to get shot, right? So don't do stupid things.
Maybe working at a gas station wasn't such a bad idea.
Yeah. It's a lower fatality rate at least. So, Tim, appreciate the discussion.
Always. Thanks, buddy.